Hey everyone, my name is Josh Bass. Thank you so much for joining me at the table. Thank you so much for the support on the last episode, Do Not Conform, our first part in the Chameleon series. This is a really cool little series I'm doing. And so today's episode is about being chosen. And the title of it is You Are Chosen. And so we're just going to kind of jump into it. If you wouldn't mind pulling a chair up to the table, let's talk. Let me ask you something personally, like one-on-one, like we're best friends. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt unwanted? Not loud rejection, not clearly being pushed away, just overlooked. The kind where no one says you don't belong here, but somehow you still know it. Somehow you still feel it. Most of us carry that feeling longer than we realize. It shapes how we enter rooms, how much of ourselves we show, and how honest we're willing to be with others and even ourselves. And for many people, that same fear sneaks into how they think about God. If he's real, would he actually want me? And so today we're going to be talking about identity, not the kind you build, but the kind that you receive. In the first episode, we talked about conformity, how people slowly blend into the world around them like a chameleon. But here's the deeper truth underneath that conversation. Most people don't conform because they want to lose themselves. They conform because they're trying to belong. And if you don't know who you are, you always become whatever the environment rewards. That's why this conversation comes before mission, before responsibility, and before purpose. Before we ask, what should I do? I have to ask, who am I? Who are you? Now, there's a letter in the New Testament, 1 Peter, and it was written by one of Jesus' closest followers, one of his best friends, a man who failed publicly many times, denied Jesus under pressure, and was later restored. And the guy's name is, say it with me, Peter. Now, Peter isn't writing to religious elites. He's not writing to the Pharisees or to the people who know it all. He's writing to ordinary people. But these people are scattered across different regions. People who feel like outsiders in their own culture. Some are misunderstood. Some are marginalized. Some are suffering quietly. And into that reality, Peter writes these words, and they're kind of shocking if you put yourself in their shoes. He says, you are a chosen people, God's own possession. Now, that phrase can sound distant or overly religious if you didn't grow up around the Bible. So let me slow it down and break it down for you. When Peter says chosen, he doesn't mean better than. He doesn't mean morally superior. He means intentionally wanted. You are a intentionally wanted people. Chosen not because of performance, but because of purpose. Now, Peter uses a phrase that it's easy to gloss over, but actually incredibly important. God's own purpose. In plain English, it means this. You belong, not because you earned it, but because you were claimed. And throughout the whole Bible, this is how God speaks to people who feel uncertain, afraid, or forgotten. Hundreds of years before Jesus, there's a moment recorded where God says to his people, they will be my people and I will be their God. This wasn't said to people who had it all together. It was said to people in exile, people who had lost their stability, security, and confidence in the future. The message was simple and steady. You're not forgotten. I'm not walking away. Now, Christianity teaches that Jesus didn't erase that promise. He actually made it accessible to everyone. And if you pay attention while you're reading the Bible, you'll notice a pattern. Whenever God is about to call someone into something new, he first reminds them of what is already true. Because suffering makes us forget. Fear rewrites memory. Peter is doing that exactly here. He says, listen, I know life is heavy And I know you feel out of place, but before anything else, remember whose you are. And maybe you've needed that reminder too, not because you failed, but because life has been really, really loud. But Peter doesn't stop at identity. He says people are chosen so that they can reflect something about God to the world around them. In other words, being chosen isn't about privilege. It's about purpose. Your life becomes a window, not perfect, not polished, but honest. And people start to notice how you handle pressure, how you respond to suffering, and how you treat others, even when there's nothing to gain. And whether you believe in God yet or not, this idea still lands. Who you believe you are will always shape how you live. There's another story in the Bible that brings all this into focus. It's in the book of Acts, and we meet this man named Saul. He was deeply religious, but also deeply violent. He actually hunted early Christians, believing that he was defending God. Then one day while traveling, Saul has an encounter with Jesus. Not after repentance, not after moral improvement. Jesus interrupts him, calls him by name, and Saul's life breaks open and eventually becomes Paul, the same man who writes much of the New Testament. The significance of that story is this: Christianity does not teach that people change, then God accepts them. It teaches that being encountered by grace is what changes people. And at the center of Christianity is a claim that's both offensive and freeing. You are not loved because you are impressive. You are loved because God chose to love. Jesus didn't wait for people to become worthy. He stepped into brokenness and met them there. The cross, central to Christianity, represents this idea that God would rather suffer with humanity than abandon it. Being chosen doesn't inflate your ego. It settles your soul. It says you don't have to perform to belong. You don't have to blend in to be accepted. You don't have to earn what's being offered, because it is by grace that you have been saved through faith. And this is not of your own doing. It is a gift of God that he freely gave. So as we wrap up, I want to invite you to slow down for a moment, not to analyze, not to fix anything, just to notice. Where did this conversation touch something in you? For some of you, the idea of being chosen feels comforting, but maybe it feels distant, like something you want to believe, but you're not sure if you're allowed to. For others, it feels almost uncomfortable. And I relate to this. It does feel uncomfortable because if you're honest, you've built your life around proving your worth. And the idea that you don't have to earn belonging feels kind of foreign. And maybe for some of you, the word chosen brings up resistance, because being chosen also means being seen, and being seen is risky. So let me say this clearly without pressure. Christianity doesn't start with what you do for God. It starts with what God says about you. Before behavior, before belief systems, before you have everything figured out, the claim is this: you're not an accident, you're not overlooked, and you're not invisible. And it feels hard to accept that. That doesn't disqualify you, by the way. It just means you're human. A lot of us have learned to protect ourselves by assuming we're unwanted, because it hurts less that way. But it also keeps us from receiving love when it's actually being offered. And so here's a question that I want you to sit with, and not answering out loud and not solving it quickly, but I just want you to sit with this. Whether you're driving in the car and you're finishing this, or you're sitting in your room, or you're on the couch. Where have you been living like you're unwanted? Where have you been living like you're unwanted? Even though Maybe no one actually told you that you were. And what would change if your identity wasn't built on approval or productivity or fitting in, but on being known? And if you're not sure what to believe about God yet, that's okay. This series isn't asking you to rush belief. I'm just inviting you to pay attention a little bit to the longings you've learned to ignore or the places where you've settled for less than belonging. Because here's the quiet truth underneath all of this. You will live from whatever identity you trust most. And the invitation that Jesus offers is not try harder. It's come closer. So next time, we're going to talk about responsibility, what it means to represent something bigger than yourself once identity starts to take root. But for now, just sit with this. You're not accidental. You're not forgotten. You're forgiven. And your life carries more meaning than some of you may have ever been told. Thank you so much for pulling up a seat at the table. This one was a little bit more personal. This series is more personal, and that's intentional. And so I appreciate you joining me in this conversation. I will see you at the table next week. Have a great one.